Howdy, everybody. Shasta College. Welcome to Humanities 2 as we trips our way through humanities from the Renaissance to current times. Well, guess what, folks? This is current times. Are we in a new Renaissance? You tell me. What do you think? What do you feel out there? Is this the beginning of something, the middle, or is it the end? Well, I do know one thing that cinema is everywhere. Like Luc Godard famously said, everything is cinema. Now more than ever, people are taking videos of their cats or their dinners they're having or TikTok. It's all cinema. Never thought it would get to be so public, but it is. Um, Cinema is fluid. It changes. It changes with the technology, and that's what's happening every second. How do you watch movies? Do you stream them on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus? Do you go to the movie theater? Do you like the experience of the movie theater? The big screen, the collective experience. Sometimes those are fun when there's an audience and the comedy's good. Everybody's in on the joke. When the horror's good, everybody's in on the frights. When the action is good, everybody's in on it. You're sharing it together, and there's something about sharing it together. All art needs to be shared. Paintings are shared, one viewer at a time, stepping up and looking at the painting. Of course, now it's more available than ever before with social networking and the technology we have. In the old days, you used to have to go to a museum or an art gallery or somebody's house to see their artwork. Mozart had it a little bit better. They had a public. He's in a cool town. He had benefactors who would pay for things, and he had an audience. He didn't tour. He didn't go across any oceans. There was, and yet he was known in his time. His music got out in the world. That took a lot in those days before the technology. People knew about Mozart all over Europe. Now, could they hear him? Unless the local symphony is playing his stuff, no. There's no radio, there's no stereo, there's no turntables, no Spotify, nothing. And yet his music got out into the world. That's how important it was. That's how the story starts. It starts with Mozart. He tells a story through his music, the magic flute, and somehow it transcends the ordinary and gets out into the universe. It's kind of magical if you think about it. We're still doing the magic flute. Ingmar Bergman loved it. That's one of my favorite filmmakers. I never had a chance to talk about Bergman. Maybe I'll talk about Bergman today. He made a movie of it. People made ballets of it. It's a perennial classic. But before television, before movie cameras, before recordings, how does music get out? How did the paintings of Michelangelo get out there in the world? Van Gogh's paintings never did get out there in his lifetime. Oh, but after that, they got out there. Art is a fundamental human expression of who we are, of who we hope to be. Cinema is still trying. Every day we're trying. I consider myself a filmmaker, although you've never seen my films, nor have you ever heard of them, but still keeps the dream alive. Visual storytelling. It's transitory, meaning it's always changing. Changes with the culture, changes with the times. That's why in your let me take 1 minute break here. Hang on a sec. Oh, let's see here. Oh. I'm back. My cats, when they want out, they want out now. Even though it's freezing, and they'll be scratching at the door soon because cats do not like to be cold. Anyway, pardon for the intrusion. Where was I? Yes, cinema is universal. Um, People are watching movies every square inch of the planet Earth. The far off reaches, people have a way and means to watch a movie right there. The stories, you think we tell the same story over and over? We do, but there's a different voice telling the stories. So that's what makes it different. There's always a different voice behind the story. I mean, supposedly they say there's only 7 stories. 7 stories. I'm not sure I believe all that, but um, the Greeks started storytelling 2,000 years ago, then Shakespeare 500 years ago, and on we go. Cervantes wrote his novel several hundred years ago, The Hero's Journey, and we're still doing Spider Man, This Hero's Journey. That's Greek mythology, folks. Nothing new in Spider Man. Um, we went from cinema, watching it in primitive Nickelodeons, which essentially kind of like a little tiny machine you look into. You pay a nickel, and you see a 1 minute long horse running or people kissing or a guy lifting weights. That was early movies. And they would put in one nickel after another because they needed to see it, the story. And that's how important the story was. And they expanded the story. And all of a sudden, we're doing movies like Trip to the Moon, surreal sci fi movie made 1903. D.W. Griffith's epic films, Intolerance and Birth of a Nation, the Charlie Chaplin movies of the 20s, John Ford and Howard Hawks and of the 30s, Orson Welles and Howard Hawks again, John Ford again in the 40s. In the 50s, we go through so many great filmmakers from Elia Kazan to William Wyler to Billy Wilder, Alfred Hitchcock, Ida Lupino. We never had time to do female. We never had time to do female filmmakers. Maybe I'll briefly talk about that here in a moment. But the stories expand with the technology. And we have a need for these stories. I'm going to interrupt myself again. Get out of here. Go on. Yeah. So that's why there's so many streaming services, and they're adding more streaming services every minute because we have an insatiable desire to see our story up there on a screen somehow. It makes life easier to see our story. We can see our story and know that we're not alone in the world. We see our story and see that we're not so crazy, that other people are just as equally as crazy or equally as passionate, equally as creative, whether it's South Africa, South America, or Texas or LA, Canada, Alaska, the human condition. Nothing's really changed since caveman time. Never covered many, couldn't cover much in the cinema. You guys should take my cinema class in the spring, and then get a real in-depth, um, hopefully an in-depth picture of motion pictures. I never talked about foreign films. Didn't have time to talk about foreign films. Have you ever seen a foreign film? Federico Fellini, Akira Kurosawa, Japanese filmmaker, did The Seventh Samurai. Fellini did Eight and a Half and La Dolce Vita. These are monumental works of cinema in a different language. Yes, you have to read the subtitles. Ingmar Bergman from Sweden made 45 movies in 45 years. He never stopped making cinema. He made one movie a year. And plus, he was a director in the National Theater in Sweden. And he directed some of the greatest masterpieces in cinema history. Maybe you've heard of him: The Seventh Seal, Persona, Passion of Anna, Shame, Winter Light. If we had time, I'd assign you a Bergman film to watch. We'll stay the same. Hopefully not. Didn't talk much about tons of stuff I couldn't cover, like current cinema. I usually cover that in the other class. What are you watching currently? X-Men Part 25, Fast and Furious Part 55, or do you prefer something original and new and perhaps unknown? Does it always have to be familiar? You always have to know what it is? Women were directing films in the silent films. Yeah, that's right. One of the most successful women directors in the history of silent films was directing films in 1900s, early 1900s. And people were going to them, and they were considered feminist films. They were usually about something to do with a woman who was with child but not married, things like that. Pretty radical for us to go. She was making those movies before women had the right to vote. Later on, it loosened up a little, and an actress by the name of Ida Lupino, who was a pretty successful movie star, but she wanted to direct movies. And late 1940s, she started directing movies. We would call them B movies. Uh, and she directed quite a few of those, and then she became a successful television director, and she kind of paved the way for other women filmmakers. Women making movies today are still not that many, but they're getting better, more strong. Right now, Jane Campion has a brand new film out, getting lots of notoriety. She's from New Zealand. She did the piano, and she has a new movie out. I'm forgetting the name right now. You're the Dog, something like that. I want to go see it, of course, because I always seek out the art films. They usually don't come to places like Reading. You usually have to go elsewhere to see them, but I travel around where they play. I suggest you do the same thing and not just go to the mall and see the big blockbuster. You're missing out on a lot of our humanity. And actually, you're playing it safe. I dare you to go out there and watch a complicated art film with subtitles. Um, Cinema is complicated. We're complicated. The stories get more complicated. And we desire to tell these stories. We desire to see these stories. There's a whole other realm of experimental cinema, uh, 50s and 40s, 60s. Andy Warhol was one of those filmmakers. Stan Breckenridge. And their films played mostly in nightclubs and art galleries. They weren't playing in movie theaters for the most part. Sometimes they did. Did they make money off of it? Probably not. Did it stop them? Probably not. You do a film because you have to, not because you're going to try to get rich off of it. Some people do, most don't. But the need to tell a story is powerful. And all it takes to tell your story now is this. That's pretty simple. This is a movie camera and an editing suite. And you could create your music on here too. It's all right there in the palm of your hand. But it still takes work. It still takes the ability to tell a story in a creative way. It still takes a lot of talent and drive and perseverance. Like everything worthwhile, it takes work. So now we're coming to the end of this course, but we're near the end of cinema. Cinema is too big for this course. It's too big for any course. You've got your assignments this week. Everything's due now. Get it into me. It's going to take me, the class doesn't get over officially till the end of this week. And it's going to take me at least another week to grade everything and get the final grades in. So don't be emailing me about where my grade is. If you paid attention, followed these lectures, and I know some of you have, and I know some of you haven't. That's the world we live in. Hope you got something out of it. I'm going to do one more lecture before this is over. Whether you listen to it or not, I never know. Someone has said, well, is there a way to grade the lectures? I don't want to do that. I could say, well, if you watch the lectures, it's 5, 10 points. Maybe I'll do that. But then you got to prove to me that you've seen the lectures. You've got enough to do. I've got enough stuff to grade. But we're at the end of things, and at the ending of things, people get panicky because they're missing assignments. Get everything in right now. And if it's closed, email it to me. You'll be late. You'll lose some points. At least you won't get a 0. Godard also said, I'm going to finish this tonight on a simple thing that Jean-Luc Godard, the French filmmaker, said. He's pushing 90 and still working on a new movie. He said, truth is 24 frames a second. Now, what he meant by that was in the old days, before video destroyed movie cameras, a movie camera that actually had film going through it went through 24 frames a second. That's what our eye saw that makes it move in like a normal motion. Silent films were filmed at 16 frames a second, and that's why they kind of appear jerky to us when we watch them, because they had a different frame rate. When sound came in, it became 24 frames, and then they married the sound with the camera, and so that was what we've considered normal motion. But now it's different. These video cameras are 60 frames, 30 frames. There's no frames in digital world. They just use that term. They got to use something. But actually, a frame of film was a frame of film. It's actually one frame. And it went through the camera. 24 those frames, which is probably a strip 2 feet long, would make one motion. So the film has to go through there a lot. It's expensive. Even the films I made were mostly done on 16 millimeter. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of film going through the camera at 24 frames a second. Now it's not so bad. Digital, you can film all day in one film drive. So, but can you tell a story? And that's the challenge. So, this is crunch week, folks, and then we have a Christmas break, and we have a month off, and we start the semester all over again in January. I'll be back online because they're going to be remodeling my old building. And I think because it's still COVID's going on, I think they're going to have a lot of classes mostly online. So don't give up. Don't get disheartened. Embrace the online culture. You already do anyway. Why not get educated from the comfort of your own couch? The other day I was out shopping. This happens to me once in a while. I do go out. And I ran into one of my former students from his class I had a couple of years ago. Now, I didn't know her because, well, I've had hundreds of students. So, and it was an online class. So I only know people through their papers and stuff. And she did well in the class, by the way. And she said, she took my film class and she said, that I changed her mind on black and white. Now she loves black and white films, and it's opened up a whole new world to her. Well, that's what I do, folks. I open up new worlds if it's possible. If you're open, you have to be open to it, though. Also, she's gone on to study, and now she's going to be a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor, and got her degree and things like that. So they go on. You all go on to do something great, I hope. Anyway, I'll talk more to that the last lecture. I'm just saying this is the end of the week. Christmas break. Give me some time on grading the papers, and I'll see you next time where the story of humanities will continue.